which I know has been a big topic of conversation for us. And if you've joined us at any of our item review sessions, it has been quite an important topic, as we understand that teachers want to know more about learning progressions, and they currently have somewhat of a limited knowledge. So our goal today is for you to be well informed about learning progressions so that you can help lead the work in your school. Today, you have me, Melissa Finkel. I apologize for my voice. I'm suffering from whatever is going around in the schools that I seem to have picked up and have a bit of a cold. Our Lisa is actually in one of our schools today in Anne Arundel County, and we have our newest team member, Eric, with us as well. Say hi, Eric.
Hey guys, what's going on?
We don't have his beautiful picture up here yet because he's only been with us a few days, but you will hopefully be in touch with him, and he will now be the one who gets to deal with any issues you guys have with Blackboard. So thank you for Eric. So please make sure that you have the handouts that I have sent to you, and they are on the blog and they are on Blackboard as always. We're going to be using all of these different tools today. We're going to be looking at sample learning progressions, criteria for developing them, the examples of practice. We're going to be looking through those vignettes. And you also should have the agenda and the PowerPoint slides if you'd like to follow along. They are also available on our Google Drive. So we're going to start with a check-in chat in the chat box on the left. So this can be a little broader than just this past week since it is Monday. And I know that we've had quite a few holidays. So in the past few weeks, what is one sign of classroom formative assessment implementation that you've observed in your school? So let's go ahead and start with that one. We'll move to the second question afterwards. So what is one sign of classroom formative assessment implementation that you observed in your school this week? And if you do have a microphone or telephone and you would like to share, go ahead and raise your hand. Use the raise your hand tool, and I will call on you since we have more than one and we don't need chaos. Okay, Doug, go ahead and start us off. What is one sign that you've seen?
At our school this year, we have a PLC focus, and a part of that is structured coaching to each content-specific PLC. And so I had a PLC this week that was specifically doing the work from some of the other COP meetings, and so they were planning on what they were going to take back to the classroom. So it was an opportunity to see individuals planning around their implementation.
That's great. And so what do you think they came away with from that session that they had?
Well, it was, of course, one of our kind of lead COP participants, Irene, which, Melissa, you know who that is. And so some of their dialogues about making the connections with our MYP implementation, but this was specifically a 6th grade World Studies group that was planning. So we have an upcoming event, and they were kind of laying the groundwork for connecting what the COP was doing and then what they're going to do kind of later in the unit.
Great. Not seeing a whole lot of action in our chat box right now. Would you like to share? I think that was David. Oh no, did we lose him? David, are you still there? Okay.
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me? Okay. I think one of the biggest things that our group is looking at right now is with the collaboration and self and peer assessment of their knowledge. So the teachers and the community of practice have been really working on that to really look at what the kids are doing, how they're learning, and then becoming more empowered and owners of their own learning within the classroom. This was an example that I saw when students working on the writing process. They were writing to persuade. They were really looking at their papers and assessing the strength of their persuasion within the class and what they've been using in order to to really drill down and really self-assess their knowledge, as well as working together with other partners and really looking at the writing and helping each other get better. So it's been pretty powerful that we've been seeing a switch to students actually becoming more responsible for their own learning.
That's great, and I know that was a concern. Full disclosure, I'm working with both of your schools, both of the middle schools. I know it was a concern with your group that, you know, how that would work and what it would actually look like, and it sounds like that's actually happening now, where they're moving towards taking the work and making it actually have evidence of that in the classroom. Lindsay, did you want to share one sign of classroom formative assessment that you observed in your school this week or in the past week or two? I think she's having a bit of connectivity issues. And while we're waiting for people to type in the chat box, so what questions do you have about learning progression? Because if it's anything like our experiences with our item review, there are many, many questions about learning progression. So what specific questions do you have about learning progressions that we can hopefully get through today? Let's see, and who will raise their hand first? Go ahead, Doug.
So the one that I really have is, I think in most cases with professional development, I feel as though I have some teachers who are moving really quickly through this content, and then some teachers that are not. So when the learning progressions have been implemented elsewhere, what were some of the takeaways in helping some teachers that aren't just learning this quickly or effectively? How can you catch them up? Because I imagine some are it's gonna come easy to them, or they're probably already doing some of these things in the classroom, but some are going to struggle.
Okay. So how do we differentiate that?
It's simply put, yes.
Yes. Lindsay, what questions do you have if you want to type in the chat box? I have no idea what happened either. Blackboard Collaborate has a mind of its own. Some questions you might have about learning progressions in the classroom. And David, if you're still there, if you want to go ahead and discuss that as well.
Sure. I'm going to kind of piggyback on what the last guy said, was that I have some teachers that are gung-ho and have been putting everything into place, and then I have some teachers that are definitely dragging their feet. And I don't know if it's, you know, it's because they don't want to do it as quickly as possible, or you know, they might not have some of the resources or skills, or if just with everything that else is going on right now with them, they're just kind of bogged down. So I guess kind of looking at other ways that we can help motivate some of the teachers in order to get everything done in a timely manner and effectively implement the formative assessment piece within the classroom.
Okay, so it seems like we have a common thread of people, as Lindsay says, we have people moving at very different rates. So really finding a way to support those teachers who are struggling, and find ways for them to, I don't know if we want to say catch up, but to come at it from a different sort of understanding. And whether, I don't know if it's something that you're seeing in different content areas or it's just the personality or the person themselves. But if it is something that is content specific, it would be really useful if your facilitator could share that with us. You or your facilitator could share if it's a content specific need, like they're not sure how to do it, what it's supposed to look like in their content area. That would be great, because we can definitely get resources to support that. And Lindsay, I think our teachers are feeling lots of change and don't necessarily see connections between what we are doing school-wise. I plan to make those connections. Great. And just so you know, Doug's team made a really great visual, and with their permission, we're going to be sort of fine-tuning it to a general broad term, and would like to share that with all of our participants. I'm going to check with Irene and make sure she and her son are fine with that, Doug. But it's a great way of, the visual that they made is a great way of expressing all of the different initiatives and concerns and things happening in your school, while explaining how formative assessment sort of ties all of those things together and brings it all home, like Common Core and PARC and you know, learning by design, or understanding by design, middle years IB program, all the different things that are happening. And good. And I will definitely share that out. So we're trying to increase those resources. So moving on. And if at any time, if you do have any of those concerns, those content area concerns, please let your same person know, because we are working very closely with WestEd at all times, and they're happy to share resources. So sessions 2, 3, and 4, we're focusing on the different attributes of formative assessment, particularly those that are foundational and are introduced early in the same modules. So today we are focusing, the previous sessions were focused on learning goals and success criteria, and today we're really looking at learning progressions. So we're building on that pre-session work, and we want you to be prepared for when your teachers are going through the sessions on learning, or the modules on learning progression. And as we try to model good formative assessment practices, our sessions will be framed by the following questions: where are we headed, where are we now, and how do we close the gap? So our guiding question today is, how can we support teachers in effectively developing and using learning progressions as they implement classroom formative assessment? And I think it's a major concern for everyone, so it's great that it is our guiding question. Our learning goals today, by the end of this session, you'll have deepened your understanding of learning progressions and their role in formative assessment. You should also be prepared to address potential challenges related to supporting teachers as they develop and use learning progressions for formative assessment purposes. Finally, you'll have given important forethought to how learning progressions may dovetail with other curriculum tools and resources already in use at your school, which is very important. Your success criteria: you know you're being successful when you can explain what a learning progression is and the role it plays in formative assessment. You can clarify how learning progressions complement other instructional tools. You can recognize potential leadership challenges related to teachers' use of learning progressions and identify strategies for addressing them. And you can identify leadership practices that can strengthen your school's current stage of implementation. So our agenda today, we're going to reconnect. We just had an overview of session 1. Where are we headed? Where are we now? How can we close the gap? And then looking ahead. During the pre-session, you were asked to read some vignettes and comment on the following questions about one of them. So how did the teacher's consideration of where students' understanding fit into a learning progression inform his practice? What might have happened during the lesson without such consideration? And what did the teacher need to understand to be able to make effective use of the formative assessment strategies he employed? And that is handout 3.1. If you need to refer back to that. So these key criteria should guide the development or assessment for learning progressions across the curriculum and across grade levels. So go ahead and read the criteria in front of you. These criteria are provided to teachers in Module 2 of the FAME course and are important guidance for helping teachers develop learning progression. So your teacher should be going through this in the module right now, in Module 2. For formative assessment purposes, learning progression should provide a description of learning in each category that will support instructional planning. They should provide sufficient detail to map formative assessment opportunities that will elicit evidence at key points along the progression. They should support teachers to quickly identify where students are along the learning progression. In other words, to help define what the gap in learning is in relation to the learning goal. And they should support students to take next steps in learning. And we know that that last point is very important. It should support students and encourage them to be leading their own learning. So we're going to go ahead and review. We're going to invite you to consider where one classroom snapshot fits into the formative assessment continuum of practice. So review vignette B6 on page 9 of Formative Assessment Examples in Practice and the Learning Progressions. It's important to prompt each other for evidence. So what evidence in the vignette leads you to place the teacher at the place you identified along the continuum? Don't be shy about asking each other to base your decision on evidence, as this is a key skill to support your leadership. And we're going to, let's see, how many people do we have right now? I think we're fine to stay in full group right now. I'd like to give you about 5 minutes to go ahead and review Vignette B6. Once you are finished reviewing the vignette, because it may have been a while since you have looked at it, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and then we will move forward with the discussion.
So, Melissa, I got a quick question for you.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm here.
Are you there?
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Okay. I still haven't been able to connect correctly, so I'm kind of just at the Blackboard website looking at the different materials as you call them up. Is there any other place that would have the PowerPoint kind of that you're going through right now? Because remember, I couldn't. Okay.
Yeah. It's
The
the same course. Oh, really?
I was getting blocked. Yeah, because I was clicking on your into the blog spot, and it wouldn't. Carroll County's.
Are you able to get to Google Drive at all? Okay.
I cannot.
I'm about to send you a gigantic email then.
No.
With all of the files.
All right. Can you?
That's okay.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm doing everything for this meeting. I'm just kind of flying a little bit blind. So
I can't believe the blog is still blocked, and I told you I am going to make that happen. I'm going to work on Carroll County's firewalls and get that fixed.
I'm going to try to go some kind of back way or something. It's just a blog. It's it's FameBlog.
No, it's same
access denied.
cohort.blogspot.com.
All right, let's see if I can get this one, because the other one is I get access
I just
denied.
sent you an email with all of the materials.
Rock. Because, I mean, I was able to get in
Strange.
a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, same cohort.
Blogspot.com.
And if you request, no. Okay, well, I just emailed you everything.
I can't get in. All right, thank you.
One of these days, everybody will have the same access.
I know.
One of these days, every district will just give in and go to the monolith that is Google.
I agree.
Okay.
It would be nice.
Okay, Brian's asking for the same email. I will just send that to you as well, Brian, if you can hear me. I can't believe that so many of our districts are still not allowing access to some of these really, really useful tools.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. And Brian, I just
Thank
sent
you
it
for
to you
sending that to
too. So we're looking at, and these are all on Blackboard, by the way, as well. They are in the discussion group. All of the files should be there in the file exchange,
Right.
except for the PowerPoint. So we are looking at, you got it? Okay, so we're looking at handout 3.1 right now, page 9, and we're looking at the vignette about high school economics.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we are looking at the formative assessment continuum of practice, okay, Paula wants the same email. All right, Paula, give me 1 second. I'm sending it to you as well. There we go. Okay. Okay, I think I skipped that. So we're going to go ahead and look at Vignette B6. So if you read Vignette B6 on page 9 about high school economics, and then handout 3.1, the formative assessment continuum observation tool, we're going to go ahead and look at those and discuss. So please take a minute, look over the 3.1 continuum observation tool. And the one that we have here, the first page, is learning progressions. So please take a minute to look through the continuum observation and determine where the teacher is, either developing practice, improving practice, or extending practice. Take a minute to compose your thoughts. What we're going to do is I'm going to open up the whiteboard for writing and allow those who want to write in the chat room to write in the chat room. Allow those who want to write on the whiteboard to write on the whiteboard, as long as I can remember how to insert that whiteboard again. There we go. And so again, I will post those questions for you. Remember to use the tools on the left if you choose to write in the whiteboard and respond to the questions there. And Eric is learning about all of the wonderful and terrible things that Blackboard can do and can't do. There we go. Fix my typos. And with any response that you have in the chat box or on the whiteboard or verbally, as we would expect of our students, please provide evidence with your response. So who would ever like to start, if you want to verbally discuss, or Doug, if you want to go ahead and talk right now, or Lindsay, if you want to type. I see Doug is typing. Okay, 'cause it's a little fast.
I was typing, but I'm going to go
totally
ahead and
fine.
talk. Is that okay, Melissa? Okay. When I was looking at the continuum, I found myself falling somewhere in between developing practice and improving practice for this particular teacher. And I think is maybe leaning a little more on developing practice, because a big portion of the improving practice portion of the continuum is that there is strategy-based ways for students to demonstrate their learning. So I was looking at bullet point 3, where teachers use strategies that elicit evidence throughout the lesson or unit to collect data on student progress along the learning progression. And I felt as though there was an opportunity for students to share, but it was not necessarily a formal strategy. And the students that already knew it were allowed to kind of begin their homework. But students, and then that's kind of where they stopped. So that doesn't really fully meet all of the thinking in bullet point 3. So I would say that that teacher is developing practice.
Let's see, Lindsay, the teacher knew the learning progressions and anticipated misconceptions. Okay, so where would you place them, continuing that thought, Lindsay, where would you place them on the continuum of practice? And David, if you would like to share out if you have those files and you're ready to go.
Okay.
Is he writing? And Paula, if you want to join in as well, okay, if you didn't complete the pre-session, all of the pre-session work, that's totally fine. If you just want to go ahead and type in a response. Because really the goal is to help you understand, how to identify where your teacher is on this continuum of practice. And if you were just popping into the classroom, that you could see this and figure out, where they really are.
I actually cannot see anything on my computer due to some issues, so I decided to call in anyway, verbally. Okay.
Were you able to get any of the files?
I was able to download, like I'm looking at session 3. Yeah, I have a lot of issues, so I have the handouts. I'm able to pull that up, but I'm not able to get into Blackboard, Collaborate, or anything like that. So I only actually have the handouts that were the attachments to the email.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of listening.
If you want to go ahead and look at 3.1, and we're just sort of discussing page 9, the vignette 6.
Okay.
Right,
formative assessment examples of practice. Okay.
Let's see. And Lindsay, I agree with near developing. The teacher's getting there but has ways to improve. Identifying determinants could be higher order thinking instead of just identifying. Great. Continue practice. Oh no.
And I would developing practice of this teacher. I think he's getting towards the improving practice, but he's still developing. The kids are being taught the information. However, it doesn't seem like they're becoming owners of their learning at this point in time. I think that they're developing that to eventually for that to happen, but I don't think in this lesson it's done. Like the other gentleman said, the kids that showed that they mastered the concepts were just allowed to do homework to reinforce some of the learning that they had. It wasn't taking their knowledge and moving forward again, which I think would be more of if we're moving into improving practice.
Okay, great. And let's just wrapping up. Great. So Brian, I place his teacher in developing as he or she clearly thought through a pathway of learning, but much of the strategy described as teacher dependent rather than student generated. Great, and that's exactly, I think, what we were trying to get to here in this conversation, is that it did seem really dependent on the teacher, although the teacher does have some students moving forward. The discussion and the sort of review of topics really seemed to be focused on the teacher instead of the students carrying that conversation on their own. So if we are taking a look at handout 3.3, the sample learning progression. Let's consider how learning progressions fit into a teacher's existing toolkit. And I hate that phrase, but it's true. Their existing toolkit and the role these progressions play in formative assessment. So you may want to refer to pages 4 and 6 of your pre-session participant guide during this discussion, which I think I also pushed out to you as well. And there are learning progression samples for each grade band that should be in there. I think it would be appropriate for each of you to look at what's appropriate for your grade band, and we can just sort of discuss in slightly more general terms. But I don't want high school teachers looking at, or high school principals looking at the elementary level, because it's just not useful. So thinking about it, thinking about the sample learning progressions and the participant guide, and this sort of harkens back to our summer leadership with our challenge cards. Imagine a teacher, when asked to create a similar learning progression, saying, why do I need this? We already have a scope and sequence, a curriculum map, and a rubric for assessing student understanding of the unit learning goals. So how would you respond to this teacher? And so take a look at one of the learning progression samples. Take about 5 minutes to look at the sample that you would like to talk about, and we'll share out in just a few minutes. And those are on 3.3, and if you need those files, just go ahead and let me know. So whenever you're ready to go ahead and share out about one of the learning progressions that you looked at and how you would respond to your specific teacher, you can go ahead and raise your hand and we can get started. Okay, Doug, do you want to go ahead and start chatting while Lindsay goes ahead and Brian and everybody else starts writing? No, go ahead and talk.
Yes, so you want me to write this one, Melissa? Oh, okay. So when I was looking at the 3 parts of the teacher question, which is the scope and sequence, a curriculum map, and a rubric for assessing student learning, that kind of breaks down to the scope and sequences, which is what students know and are able to do, a curriculum map, which is how you get there, and then a rubric for assessing student understanding, which is feedback to students so that they understand what they have learned and where they need to go. And so if you compare that to the actual progression, and I looked at one for Japanese American internment, this breaks it down for teachers to know and understand what students have learned based on proficiency. And so this is a way for teachers to evaluate through their assessment where students are based on criteria. And that is not directed for students, it's directed for teachers to evaluate up against the criteria. This is where students are. They are at a level 4, they are at a level 3, and based on the 3 things that the teacher has really said, that's not a part of the 3 things that they have identified. So it's important so that teachers are able to kind of go back and see student by student where they are based on their
the ones, the sample learning progressions we're looking at, these are the teacher forward ones. These are not what students would have in front of them. And we do hope that, that is the goal, is that students will have a learning progression that is in student-friendly language, that maybe, students have put in their own language themselves as a group, so that the students can look at those and determine where they are, because that is a large part of it. Let's see. Okay.
And Melissa, if I may build on that, I think what's very important for teachers to understand is that the teachers can look at the progression based on those levels, and then it's critical for them to know and understand how to provide feedback to students, student-friendly language that's positive so that they can grow, because they're actually going to transfer what they know up against this criteria into ways for students to understand that long term. And
Great.
teachers are really that bridge.
Thank you. And Paula, while provided documents are helpful in planning instruction, they do not help a teacher to identify gaps in prerequisite learning, knowledge, and understanding. The teacher needs to understand how the learning progressions will help meet the needs of the student as individual learners who begin their learning at different stages. Great. At each level of learning, the learning progression maps out formative assessment opportunities, very student-centered. Jackie said, having a good understanding of learning progressions, teachers will know where they may take a lesson based on students' needs during instruction. Fantastic. See Brian's, oh, there we go, Brian. I talk about how scope and sequence is value in giving a generic sense of the unit. However, progressions of learning help teachers and students individualize instructional learning next steps for groups of students that are specific enough to be sidetracked by a great comment and feedback. I didn't initially make the connection to feedback. Thank you. Great, Brian. Doug, do you want to share, or Doug, I'm sorry, David, do you want to share out as well?
Well, I mean, I think pretty much everybody's hit the nail on the head with everything. I looked at the lesson with the equivalent fractions for the 4th grade unit, and it's nice to be able to look at the different levels and to be able to really know where your students are, and then coming up with a plan with the students in order to move their learning forward to get them into the higher levels. So, I really like this, the learning progressions and how it's outlined for the teacher as well.
And one of the things I think is really useful when teachers look at these sample learning progressions is the idea that there will be misconceptions and that they have to outline those ahead of time, because I think that's something that maybe something math people think about all the time, but I know that in English language arts and sometimes in other content areas, it's something that we don't think about ahead of time. What misconceptions are students going to come to the classroom with, and what things are they going to get hung up with? And often our learning progressions can take it a step further, where teachers determine ahead of time or really force themselves to write down, how do I get over that hurdle? What do I do to combat those misconceptions with students? Because it may be something that they do and they don't realize it, but it's really helpful to force yourself to write that down and be aware of it. And when teachers are working through this together, in FAME, when they're working on a learning progression as a group, that is a great opportunity for conversation about how do you address those misconceptions, especially when you're determining where students are. If there's anything else anybody would like to share, we can pause. But if not, we can move on to where are we now. Okay. So we sharpened our vision of where we headed, and we've taken a look at those learning progressions and started to conceptualize what they look like and what they would look like in our school. So getting to full implementation will depend on our answers to two key questions. What's happening in our schools right now, and what tools and resources are available to help move forward towards your vision of fully implemented formative assessment. So let's do a quick check-in on where your school is now. So this is a simplified representation of handout 3.4, Formative Assessment Continuum Observation Tool. This continuum can be considered an implementation map of sorts. Its intent is not only to assist you in understanding where teachers at your school are at this point, but also how far away from their destination they might be with regard to the 5 key attributes of formative assessment. So take a minute to quietly reflect on the descriptors of practice related to the attribute of learning progression, and consider the following. So given what you know now, what level of practice would best describe your school with regard to development and use of learning progressions? So this should be a ballpark response at this point based on current knowledge and perception. And if we want to go ahead and label them A, B, and C, looking left to right, if you want to go ahead and let us know, do you think your school is A, developing, B, improving practice, or C, exemplary practice? And we'll do that quiz in just a moment, so go ahead and take a minute to think about, okay, thank you. I see a lot of developing.
Yeah, we're developing.
Okay, it looks like A's across the board, developing. Paula, did you want to share? I think she's typing it. Oh, A, okay. Right. So it looks like we're all in developing. So we're going to go ahead and discuss a little bit where your school is. So basically, what would be, oh great, some people have already started. Lindsay, thank you. Go ahead in the chat box or verbally share out just an explanation of why that is, why you see them as developing at this point. So Lindsay said, I think our teachers are just getting to understand what it even is. I look forward to our next COP where our discussions will be greater. Great, thank you. And Doug or Dave, if you'd like to share out verbally.
The thing that I'm thinking about is that I do think that some of my teachers are improving practice, especially those that are veteran, already kind of leaders in the building. So in my school, I have a couple of team leaders in the cohort of practice. And so I do think that within this idea of progression, they're a little further than other teachers. But for me, you're in developing practice until you know 100% of your teachers are in improving practice. So until the whole kind of cohort has made that move, then you're still doing work and making sure that they have the knowledge and the skills to be moving to improving practice. And they all have to be there before then you can eventually get them to exemplary practice. So I would say we're definitely in developing because there's a good number of the cohort that definitely needs to learn more and move forward to get to improving.
Dave, you want to share?
Yeah, I would say we're in developing as well. Like some of the teachers that are veterans are moving closer to improving practice. But what I noticed is that when we first started, all the teachers were like, oh, it's formative assessment. I know exactly what this is, but it's really making them reflect and really look at formative assessment in a different way. And so I think it's changing the way some of the teachers are looking at how they, how they instruct their classrooms. So it's going back and kind of relearning a different way of teaching and supporting the students within their learning. So I felt that we started at a point where everyone thought that they were experts at formative assessment, and then really kind of going full circle to really look at what they can be doing within the classroom to better assist their students. So I think that we're still in developing, but moving towards improvement.
Let's see. And Paula, our teachers were fully engaged during our first community practice session. Great. The enthusiasm is evident through their active participation. Time continues to be a struggle for all of us as we're engaged in many new initiatives in the county and our school right now. We all understand the value and are committed, but still growing. Agreed, the idea is new and empowering to the teachers in our cohort. Still in developing, but only due to newness of idea versus previous county practices. Great. And I think that's a really broad concern. As I mentioned, we have been doing task review, item review, and learning progressions are not only new to teachers, they're new to people writing formative assessment tasks and the items as well. So it is something that I think is going to be a learning focus across the company. So know that we will be supporting you and other teachers with this practice. And they may be looking to you as leaders next year in this work. So keep that in mind as well, which is hopefully okay. So if we want to take a look at this third bullet point, and for those of you who are not seeing it, what misconceptions or challenges do you anticipate teachers in your school might have related to developing and or using learning progression? And while you think about that, I just want to speak out on Doug's. Doug said I wanted to connect to Paula's point about time. Let's see. Time is always an issue, but at my school we are experiencing initiative fatigue. Yep, and that's something we expect. It becomes more difficult to promote learning when facing this. Melissa, any ideas? Wow. As always, I encourage you to help teachers see the connections between all of the different initiatives and formative assessment. We know that this course is time intensive and it is a lot of work for them. But I think part of it that's helpful to think about is this is something that teachers are working on across content areas. And it's not something that is new, and it's not something that is going to go away anytime soon. It's something that is proven to be effective across the world. You know, we're really behind in this effort. The rest of the world kind of gets it, kind of gets the ideas of formative assessment and assessment for learning, and the U.S. is really behind in this effort. So I know it's probably not comforting to teachers who are putting in a ton of work at the moment, but it is something that teachers across the country are starting to really build awareness of and try to improve their practice of. And we're not the only state working on it, but right now we're actually pretty far ahead in this work compared to other states, which is why we've been invited to bring people to different conferences to speak about it, why we've been invited to bring some of our leaders that are participating in this webinar actually to speak about some of the leadership aspects. So I know it's difficult to promote learning, but I do hope that teachers see the value of this professional learning versus some of the professional learning that is, I'd say, a requirement at times that they might not find as useful, because this is something that I believe, and I think a lot of you believe, is useful in moving their work forward. Let's see, and Lindsay said, I think this is a tough question to answer. Sorry, you know, I could talk about this forever, Doug, you know that. Lindsay said, I think this is a tough question to answer. Teachers are just learning about learning progressions in their current module. Therefore, it will be our December COP where I learn how teachers are implementing them. Not a lot of conversations about it this month, which is both a wonderful and kind of scary thing that they might come to you in December with so many questions that hopefully we can have some answers to. Doug said, one misconception that teachers may see learning progressions as an add-on. This goes back to the question asked in the previous slide. An effective and well-established learning progression is about pedagogy, an effective instruction, not an additional step. And Paula said, I believe they see this as more valuable than much of what they do. That is some of the feedback I've been receiving as well. And I know that one of the questions you may have is, how is this different from a rubric? and I'm going to be working to push out some information on that. People can use rubrics as formative assessment tools, but the major point that we like to emphasize is that the rubric is typically evaluative, as in summative. It's usually something that is not used for feedback, and it doesn't always show them what those next steps are, especially if they're getting, you know, the highest level, the highest grade in that rubric, you know, the checkerboard that we usually see, the grid. When teachers and students are looking at learning progressions, the goal of the learning progression is to give them that next step and help them build. And Brian said, I think teachers will quickly be effective at writing learning progressions. The challenge will be in using the progression to impact and change the instructional practice. Would anybody like to address that a little bit? If you have some ideas or thoughts about using the progression to impact or change the instructional practice. Doug or Dave, if you'd like to verbally address that. No? You guys just want to keep making me talk? Go ahead. Someone raise their hand. Go ahead, Doug.
The thing that I'm thinking about is with the challenge is that it's not enough for the leader or the department head or whoever is trying to make that bridge realize it, because we kind of already know it. It's getting teams, planning teams, to mutually agree to use learning progressions to impact instruction. And so I think about this all the time with our PLCs. You know, how do you prime teachers' thinking so that they want to come up with the idea on their own? And one thing that has helped us in MCPS is we try to define things as macro or micro. So macro learning is the big concept. It's teaching the ideas, which it sounds like, Brian, your teachers may have that, so then you've got to get it down to the micro level. So you could actually talk with some of the teachers or your planning teams to say kind of, you know, what do we need to get it actually down to the implementation level. So that might help you frame your challenge a little differently.
That's great. Let's see. I'm imagining a reflection template where teachers have to identify a specific student or group of students and think through a plan of how to use the progression to impact the next lesson. I see that focus on micro. I really like that. And again, you know, we're talking about encouraging teachers to start small. You know, that really is a goal. We don't want them to bite off more than they can chew at once, and to have more failures and successes and let that sidetrack them. So starting with a few students, that is great, and having them think about what they will do next. Oh great, Lindsay, a couple of our teachers saw the learning progressions leveling at MAG and have started having students level themselves. If others see the impact that it has, change across the school will happen. That's great, and I think what we're trying to encourage, you know, in our schools is having those open doors and really inviting people to see some of that good work. I know some of the schools that I'm working with, we're trying to encourage that as sort of a next step, where we get our teachers comfortable enough to have other famed teachers come through the classroom, and then the next step after that is to encourage our non-famed teachers to see some of that formative assessment work, to get them excited about that, to get them to have that awareness, because I know for the teachers not participating, they might wonder, you know, what's the point of it? Why are they doing that? And seeing it in action, I think, is the most powerful part. So we'll go ahead and move on to, now that we pretty much know where we are, how can we close that gap? So we're going to go ahead and talk about some more possible next steps, because you guys have done a great job of addressing those so far. And so this activity that we're going to do, it asks you to consider what needs to happen at your school to support teachers in developing and using learning progressions as part of formative assessment practice. So refer to that same learning progression you looked at before. Look at handout 3.2, which is the key criteria for developing learning progressions. 3.6, which is the same template that teachers are asked to complete, which is pretty much what you saw in 3.3. And the learning progression section of handout 3.5, which is on page 4, which describes potential challenges and leadership responses that may arise when working with learning progressions. And that 3.5, page 4, is really, really useful to look at. So in this group discussion, after you take a minute to look through all of those resources that I just listed, I want you to explore what needs to happen for the teachers in your schools to be able to develop and use a learning progression. I really love some of the ideas that you already discussed, like having a teacher start small, pick a few students and decide what should happen next. And Lindsay, it's great. It's like a perfect segue into this discussion. What we as leaders need to do is challenging. The teachers who are risk takers sometimes seem to be known as brown nosers, and others don't follow a challenge we deal with. And so part of this, I think part of this discussion, after you go ahead and take a look at the learning progression section of the leadership considerations, is that how can we encourage those teachers to be leaders, and how can we encourage people to follow? So go ahead and take a moment to look at 3.5, page 4, with Module 4 learning progressions. And when you've looked through and you have an idea of how you'd like to respond, go ahead and raise your hand. Yep.
Melissa? This is Dave.
Okay.
I just have a parent that just showed up in the office that I have to talk to. I'm going to duck out for a few minutes and come right back.
So Doug has said, I believe teachers need a lot of practice time up against a clear criteria for learning progression. So using simple feedback protocols will help teachers speak to one another about learning progressions. Additionally, I would think about long-term coaching with our school staff development teacher, so learning progressions are used over time and don't disappear. Yes, thank you, Doug. That is our goal. I've already had a discussion with our assistant superintendent about grading. Wonderful. At our last COP, teachers questioned our grading policy versus formative assessment. We shall see. And, you know, as I've mentioned before, we are going out and talking about FAME and formative assessment with all of the districts. And Paula, our teachers are very concerned about grading as well. Some exciting news for the Eastern Shore. I am going to speak next month with the superintendents of the Eastern Shore Consortium briefly about FAME. And I'm hoping, I only have 15 minutes, so if you have suggestions for what superintendents need to know in 15 minutes, please let me know. But I will be speaking about how we're really trying to look at the minute-to-minute and focus more on giving students feedback and making classrooms student-centered as opposed to focusing on, you know, grades. So, and I'm hoping to be able to speak to all of your assistant superintendents, but I have not figured out if they meet in the same way as the superintendents, because I would love to just meet everyone as well. And Lindsay, that's a great comment. I think the parents need to understand the shift as well. I've mentioned this before, but it's actually happening now. We are meeting with our vendor on Wednesday, and they will be starting our parent handout, things that parents need to know about formative assessment. So we will be creating a handout for that. We're working with all of these states through CCSSO, our formative assessment group, to create a handout for parents with hot links and everything about all of the different webinars and external links. So I'm going to meet with them on Wednesday, and I will actually send a message to all of you and our facilitators about what resources they think would be useful for parents that exist. Because we know that parents are one of our key stakeholders that we don't speak to enough about this. And for our schools to really do this work, we need the support of parents. And we need their understanding. They want to know, so that's a key part. Paula told me to talk about grading and reporting. Ooh, how the short timelines with interims and report cards make it difficult for teachers to focus. That's a good point. And I think we're going to really focus on the fact that we need time to give that feedback if we really want our students to be able to move forward. So what else would you say needs to happen for teachers to be able to effectively and develop and use a learning progression? I think having the support of central office is a great point. You know, having our professional learning staff understand the learning progressions and how they're used, and maybe our curriculum writers in the central office as well. Is there anything else anybody would like to add about this? No? That's all we have to say about that? Okay. And I think that this is also an important conversation to have with your facilitator as they're working through this module, if you have time to check in with them, because teachers may be communicating to them, and this December COP will be an important conversation about some of those barriers again, whether there's something like time, whether there's something that you can have control over or not. So if we're going ahead and looking ahead to the pre-session 4 activities, those will be posted by Friday. At the end of this webinar, I will ask you and send a message out to start voting on the last fall follow-up leadership webinar. Select the date and time. You will explore implementation strategies and their potential impact by sharing and discussing artifacts of implementation. You'll deepen understanding of descriptive feedback for formative assessment. So I get a lot of feedback about the need for more discussion about how to give great feedback. So that's something that we're going to really be talking about next time. And consider how descriptive feedback relates to other school and district tools for providing instructional feedback. Because during summer leadership, we talked about the fact that feedback is the heart of formative assessment. And not only do we want our teachers to be able to provide good feedback to our students, but we want students to be able to provide good feedback to each other. We want students to be able to provide good feedback to their teachers. And we want leaders to be able to provide feedback to their teachers. So looking at feedback as more than just a formative assessment instructional tool in the classroom, but throughout the school, how can we work on improving our feedback to each other? I'd like you to go ahead and look at your action plan tool if this is something you have not worked on in the past. We will be looking to collect this from all of our schools, so thinking about how you as a leader have been setting goals and taking actions and figuring out what you can do to support each step of the way. And after our last session, we will have an evaluation. But we would like you to go ahead and think about, as we move into the last fall follow-up, what is something that would be useful for next year, for the leaders who will be going through this next year? What is a format that would work for them or would work for you as well? Because we assume that your school will be participating next year, and maybe you'll be the lead administrator, or maybe you ask another administrator to really learn more about this and help lead the work in your school. So we ask you to go ahead and start thinking about that action planning tool. We do have it as a Google Doc that we've shared before, but it is available as a Word document as well for you. So as you take a few minutes to think and plan forward, consider these 5 leadership arenas and think about where will you focus your leadership efforts next. Will you focus on guiding change, leading professional learning, monitoring and providing feedback on progress, messaging connections to other initiatives, which I think a few of you have said that you really want to focus on, or sustaining efforts with the enabling factors. And looking ahead. Session 4, we'll be focusing on descriptive feedback, as I said. So for next time, complete your action plan and related tasks. Complete today's session evaluation, which I think I sent out, but if not, I will send an email. And complete the asynchronous pre-session 4 tasks, which will be posted by Friday. The next session, please make sure that you vote for the next time. It is up there. I can put this in if you want to go ahead and do that now. I do know that in some districts, shortened links don't work. Just another thing that we have to work on here at MSTE. If you are not able to access that, please let me know. I will be sending this out again as an email to everyone. And as we move forward, if you have any questions before we go today, please ask them now or forever hold your peace, and have a lovely rainy afternoon and commute home. But if you have any questions, I will stay in the room for just a few minutes for you to go ahead and ask them. If not, thank you again for joining us, and please complete the session evaluation. And I will send that out to you in just a few minutes. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Melissa, are we confirmed for Thursday's meeting? Do you have that on your calendar?
It's Thursday?
This is Doug. Correct.
No. I do not. I did not receive an invite for that. The 20th?
So we do invite. I talked with Irene, but it felt tentative to me.
In the morning?
But I had a sense that possibly you knew about this. But I wanted
in the morning?
Thursday,
okay.
Yeah. Bright and early,
8
a.m.
Okay, I can do that.
Are you sure?
I don't have to be at, I'm at NCT all afternoon, but I will be there with you guys in the morning.
Okay. I will invite you. And sorry, that's coming to you now.
I love those calendar invites. they just make life easier. And Paula, if you would like to give me a call, I will post my phone number right here, and if at any time you need to reach me, because you all know that I'm never in the office anymore, this is a rarity, you can feel free to give me a call on my cell at any time. And if not, thank you for being here.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Jack.